Or, before we dive into today's story, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone who's liked, commented, shared, and subscribed. You are the reason this space feels so special. Your constant love, encouragement, and the way you show up truly mean the world to me. And if you're new here or just passing through, I'd love to have you join the family. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps so much, and you won't miss a single story. Now, let's begin. The wind whipped through the open fields of Blue Ridge Arena, the sky brooding with the scent of coming rain. Sierra Vaughn tightened her grip on the reins of Onyx, her jet-black Frisian stallion, as the crowd buzzed beneath the looming clouds. Every hoofbeat thundered like a war drum across the soaked earth. But Onyx was steady, powerful, glorious. 18 hands tall, pure muscle and spirit. He obeyed her with a language of silent trust. Sierra sat tall in the saddle, her expression calm, her dark curls tucked beneath her helmet. The judges murmured, pins paused midair. "Last stretch, girl," she whispered. "Let's show them what grace under pressure looks like." As they entered their final pass, lightning split the sky. Gasps erupted. Sierra's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. Neither did Onyx. But the clouds weren't done. The storm hit just as she crossed the finish line, cold rain lashing her skin. By the time she was on the trail home, the downpour blurred the path ahead. She rode with quiet urgency, the forest groaning around her. Then she saw it. A worn, moss-covered rock, ancient-looking, out of place in the Virginia forest. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "If you ever see a rock with the twin wolves carved into the stone, ride away. It's older than it should be, older than this country." She slowed Onyx. 2 wolf carvings. A rush of wind struck. Onyx reared violently. "Sierra!" she shouted to herself, gripping tight. Then, a blinding light. A roar like splitting skies. The world spun. Onyx screamed. And silence. When Sierra opened her eyes, everything was wrong. The forest was quiet, but not familiar. The trees loomed taller, denser, almost sentient. The air was thick with smoke and pine and something unnameable. She looked up. The sky above was bright and ancient. Onyx stood, steady and breathing hard, steam curling off his flank. He snorted, unsettled. "What the hell?" Sierra whispered. She patted his neck. "We're okay. We're okay." A scream echoed. Human. She urged Onyx forward through the trees. Branches whipped past them until they burst into a clearing. A group of villagers, peasants in strange clothing, were being attacked by armed bandits. The men were jeering, dragging sacks and screaming orders. A woman sobbed. A child clung to a broken cart. Sierra didn't think. Her instincts surged. "Yeah!" she cried, heels into Onyx. The beast lunged forward like a shadow unleashed. The sheer sight of her, a dark-skinned woman in modern gear, on a monstrous black stallion, stopped the bandits cold. One dropped his sword. Another stumbled backward, shouting about demons. Sierra leaned low, Onyx spinning with elegance and menace. "Leave them," she shouted, voice commanding, though they couldn't understand her words. But power didn't need translation. The bandits fled. The villagers cowered. One elder fell to his knees. The rider, from the flames. And so the whispers began. He rode like the wind knew his name. Crown Prince Seong-Min was a figure carved from midnight. Dark robes, gold threading, long raven hair tied high, and eyes like tempered steel. Warriors trailed behind him, but none could match his silent intensity. He had heard of the disturbance. A woman, his guard reported, black as night, with a beast taller than a gatehouse. She commands it like sorcery. Seong-Min said nothing, but his jaw set. When they reached the edge of the forest clearing, he saw her. She was tall, regal, with eyes like dusk before a storm. Her skin gleamed in the fading sun. Her horse, a creature of night and thunder, stood motionless beside her, ears flicked forward. His men drew swords. Sierra turned slowly, hand near Onyx's neck. Seong-Min dismounted. She didn't bow. He stepped forward. "Who are you?" he asked in sharp Korean. Sierra furrowed her brows. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." He narrowed his eyes. "Try me." Then Onyx reared, not out of fear, but challenge, a statement. The prince didn't move. He simply stared, his hand resting near his sword. Sierra placed a calming hand on Onyx's neck. "Easy, boy. He's not a threat. Not yet." That made the prince's lips twitch, a hint of interest, a flicker of surprise. Who was this woman who spoke to a beast like kin and looked him in the eye without flinching? He finally said, "You're not from here." She met his gaze, and that was the moment it began. Not trust, but something more dangerous. Curiosity and fate. The royal court was a garden of vipers wrapped in silk. Sierra knew the moment she entered the grand hall, flanked by guards in silver and black armor, Onyx's distant whinny echoing behind her, that she was not welcomed. She was studied. Dozens of eyes latched onto her skin, her clothing, her posture, dark skin gleaming beneath the torchlight, curls cascading like ropes of obsidian, strange, tight-fitting clothes. She stood out like a storm cloud in a scroll painting. She kept her back straight. Let them look. Seong-Min led the way in silence, his royal robe trailing behind him like night smoke. He hadn't said a word since they left the river camp. Only a tight nod when she demanded Onyx be fed, sheltered, and not touched. In the middle of the throne chamber, an elder with pale robes and a long white beard stepped forward. The High Chancellor. "She bears no known crest," he declared, "no family name, no allegiance, and her tongue speaks riddles." Another noblewoman whispered loudly, "A foreign enchantress. Look at her skin, like polished stone. Surely she rode from the underworld." "And yet," came another voice, this one quiet, worn, and chillingly calm. "The scrolls foretold her." Heads turned. Prince Seong-Min's jaw clenched. Out from behind a tapestry stepped a man dressed in muted gray. His eyes were narrow, unreadable, as if they'd seen too many wars and too few truths. His name was Baek Do-yun, Seong-Min's most reclusive advisor, scholar of prophecies, keeper of dangerous knowledge. He unrolled a faded scroll with slow reverence. "When fire walks on two legs, clothed in night and riding the beast of shadows, she shall come bearing the power to restore or ruin the house of heaven." Whispers erupted. Sierra said nothing. She didn't flinch. But Seong-Min, he stared at her, not like the others, not with fear or awe, with calculation. His mind was always moving, like the blade he wore, sharp and ready to strike. He raised one hand, silencing the room. "She is not a prisoner," he said, "but neither is she a guest." He turned to her. "Until the truth is known, you remain under palace watch. Touch no weapon, speak no lies, and your horse will remain guarded, fed, not harmed." Sierra met his gaze, proud. "Deal. But if anyone touches Onyx the wrong way, I won't wait for prophecy." A few nobles gasped. The prince smiled. "Just barely. Then we understand each other." Her room was grand with silk-covered walls and a carved ivory bathtub. But the guards outside the door reminded her this was still a cage. Still, Sierra didn't crumble. She observed, listened, waited. Every morning, she checked on Onyx. The stable boy, a soft-spoken teen named June, was terrified at first, until Onyx let him brush his mane. She made sure he had clean feed, water, and room to stretch. Every afternoon, Seong-Min would appear, unannounced, hands behind his back, watching her from the training grounds. He never interrupted. Not when she walked Onyx through complex lateral movements. Not when she rode him bareback across the sand, whispering ancient cues. Not even when she stood in the middle of the arena, her eyes closed, Onyx circling her freely, not from fear but trust. Then one day, she spoke first. "You do realize staring's considered rude where I'm from." He tilted his head. "Where are you from?" "Somewhere too far for your maps," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. A pause. "You ride like the horse is part of you," he said finally. "Maybe he is." He stepped closer. "You're not what they expected." "And you're exactly what I expected," she replied flatly. He arched a brow. Cold, calculated, arrogant, walled off, but not stupid. That stopped him. A long silence passed between them. The wind shifted. Onyx neighed softly, watching the exchange. "Teach my guards," Seong-Min said suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "They rely on force. You rely on something else. Teach them." Sierra leaned on the fence. "And what do I get in return?" His gaze lingered on her. "Freedom." She stared hard. "Half of me wants to believe that. And the other half is still watching you." By the end of the week, she was a legend. The prince's elite guards, arrogant, rigid men, stood stiff as Sierra made them walk beside their horses rather than ride them. "Trust comes before dominance," she told them. "You want obedience? Earn it." Some scoffed. One tried to mock her accent. Onyx nipped his sleeve clean off. The rest listened. From the royal balcony, Seong-Min watched everything. Not just her technique, her patience, her grace, the way her hands never trembled, even when challenged. He studied her like a riddle. A woman out of time, a fire in mortal form. He caught himself thinking, she belongs to no one. And yet, she commands everything around her. And when their eyes met across the sand one twilight, she didn't look away. She smirked, so did he. And that night, in the quiet of the royal library, the prince found himself tracing the prophecy again. But instead of fear, there was a wonder blooming in his chest, not for her power, but for the strange, impossible calm she brought to his soul. The moon hung low, a silver coin in a navy sky, and the palace grounds had fallen into their usual hush. No clashing armor, no court whispers, no Prince Seong-Min. Or so she thought. Sierra moved quietly through the cool corridors, past slumbering guards and curtained windows, until she slipped into the stables like a shadow. She didn't need permission. Onyx needed her. That was all that mattered. She found him standing tall and quiet in his stall, the torchlight casting golden halos around his black coat. He nickered softly when she approached, his massive head lowering to nuzzle her shoulder. "I know, baby. I missed you too," she murmured, running her fingers along his mane. She brought no tools, only her presence. With one hand, she stroked his flank, and with the other, she reached into her pocket for a crumpled cloth, a small square soaked with lavender oil. He loved that scent. It reminded him of home. As she moved to gently clean his eyes and nostrils, she whispered under her breath, "This world's got us twisted up, huh? I don't know what's going on or how to get back. But I've got you. That's enough." A low breath behind her made her stiffen. She didn't turn immediately. I asked the guards not to disturb you at night, she said coolly. I told them not to disturb you, came the reply. Prince Seong-Min's voice was softer than usual. No command in it. No pride. Just presence. Sierra turned, still stroking Onyx's neck. The prince stood at the edge of the stall. No armor tonight. Just loose black robes tied at the waist, his hair undone, falling across his collarbone. Moonlight hit his face through the wooden beams overhead, casting light over one high cheekbone, one shadowed eye. He looked different. Not dangerous. Just tired. I didn't think you'd come here, she said. I could say the same of you. She gave him a look. He's my family. I don't wait for daylight to make sure he's okay. Seong-Min's gaze dropped to the giant horse, then slowly to her hand, still working gently at his side. I've seen generals break stallions with chains, he said, and yet this creature follows your touch like its breath. He's not broken, Sierra replied. He's trusted. A beat of silence. Then he stepped forward. I didn't come to question you tonight, he said. I came because I couldn't sleep. She watched him warily, her hand never stopping. You want me to fix that too? She asked, only half teasing. His mouth twitched. You make the noise in my head. Quieter. That surprised her. She stopped brushing. The silence hung there, thick between them, and for the first time, Sierra looked at him fully, not as a prince, not as her captor, not even as a man tied to some cryptic prophecy. Just a man, tired, alone, intrigued. She turned back to Onyx, voice low. People always think strength is about control, but the strongest creatures I've ever known are the ones who choose gentleness when they don't have to. He stared at her, unmoving. Then you are the strongest woman I've met, he said quietly. The words didn't flirt. They didn't seduce. They landed like truth. Sierra inhaled slowly, heart thudding. Don't say things like that, Seong-Min. Not if you don't mean them. I wouldn't risk your wrath if I didn't, he said. A long pause. Then something raw slipped through her. You confuse me. His voice barely rose above a whisper. You unravel me. Onyx let out a soft breath between them, a nudge of peace, and in that stillness they stood in the same silence, worlds apart, and yet almost touching. He didn't reach for her. She didn't move closer. But when he left, he whispered, Good night, Sierra. And when she whispered, Good night, Your Highness, she didn't mean it with mockery. She meant it as a prayer. The kingdom was shifting beneath its own feet. What began as whispers in village corners had grown into furious winds. Rumors of revolt, of chaos, of omens written in the sky the night she appeared. The Black Rider, the woman not of their world. Some called her a messenger of the gods, others a warning. And though Seong-Min said little in court, his silence was not apathy, it was calculation. And Sierra, watching from the shadows of the palace, could feel it. A reckoning was coming. They're scared of you, Jun, the stable boy said quietly one morning as he fed Onyx under her supervision. Sierra didn't look up from brushing Onyx's neck. I know. They think you'll burn this kingdom to the ground. She paused, then murmured, Sometimes I think I already did. That night, at a festival, lanterns floated across the palace lake like glowing souls. Sierra wore a hanbok, rich crimson and gold, her hair threaded with silk. She stood near the outer circle, watching dancers swirl while drums echoed in her chest. And then, pain. A glint of steel. A scream. A dagger sliced toward her ribs. Fast and clean, but not fast enough. Clang. The blade met another, inches from her body. Seong-Min stood before her, sword drawn, eyes wild. In a blur, the would-be assassin was disarmed, tackled, and dragged away. But Seong-Min didn't move. His hand was gripping her shoulder, hard. His breathing was ragged. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "So are you," he growled. She looked down, a shallow cut across her forearm. "You?" she began. "You could have died," he snapped, "and I don't know what I would have done." There it was, raw, unfiltered. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away. That night, she dreamed of flames, whole cities burning, screams in a language she didn't understand, Onyx collapsing in smoke, Seong-Min on his knees, a blade pressed to his throat. She woke with a sob in her throat and sweat slick on her skin. Her room felt like a box. She had to move, had to breathe. She found Onyx already saddled when she reached the stables. Jun stammered. "He wouldn't settle until He kept looking at the gate, like he was waiting." So she rode, fast and far, through the hills until the palace lights became stars behind her, and she wasn't alone. Halfway up the slope, Seong-Min emerged from the trees, his horse shadowing hers, silent, watchful. She said nothing. Neither did he. At the top, Onyx stopped of his own will. Sierra dismounted, looking out over the kingdom sleeping below. Torches flickered like candles. The sky above them was velvet blue, stitched with stars. Seong-Min joined her. Not too close. Not yet. She broke the silence first. "Back home, I always felt out of place. Too black for this, too female for that. But the second I sat on a saddle, everything clicked." He turned to her. "I envy you," he said. Sierra gave him a look. "You? A prince with power and silk and an army?" "You see a crown," he said quietly. "I see chains." She swallowed. He sat beside her, legs stretched, the grass soft beneath them. "I was raised to be two things, efficient and feared, not loved, not understood." Sierra looked away. "Sometimes I think being feared is the only way to be safe." A silence settled, shared. Then she reached out slowly, and her fingers brushed the back of his hand. He didn't pull away, didn't move at all. But in that stillness, something shifted, something deep and wordless and real. They didn't speak of it, didn't name it, but both knew. This was the beginning of something neither of them had been trained to survive. The palace stable had never known silence like this. Onyx lay on his side, massive body heaving, foam streaking from his mouth. His black coat, usually so sleek, now twitched with muscle spasms. His eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, were dull, clouded with pain. Sierra was on her knees, her riding gloves streaked with blood and earth. One hand pressed to Onyx's neck, the other gently brushing his mane as she murmured, "I've got you, baby. I'm here. Just breathe. Just breathe." She wasn't crying yet. Not fully. Not until he let out a strangled sound, half breath, half groan, and stopped moving for a heartbeat too long. Then the dam broke. Her breath hitched. Her shoulders curled in. A quiet sob escaped her lips like a confession. "Don't you leave me. Not you. Not you." Footsteps thundered in. Seong-Min burst through the stable doors, sword still slung at his hip, his black robe soaked from the courtyard rain. His gaze landed on her first. She didn't look up. He moved to her side, fast, too fast, and dropped to one knee beside her. Her tears were streaming now, silently, hot as fire. "Where is the royal physician?" he barked. "Here, your highness." A man stumbled forward, gray-haired, face pale as ash. I came as fast as I... Fix him, Seong-Min growled. Now! The physician knelt, hands trembling, examining Onyx. I'll need time. If the poison's already in his bloodstream, I'm not sure. I didn't ask if you were sure, Seong-Min said, rising to his full height. His voice dropped into something cold, lethal. Heal the horse, or leave this kingdom. Gasps rippled through the guards behind him. The physician stared at him, stunned. Your Majesty, you heard me. If he dies under your care, you are no longer welcome under my roof or in my lands. You, your family, your legacy, gone. The man's hands shook harder. Seong-Min didn't blink, didn't move. His fists clenched at his sides. His voice cracked. Just once. All I see is her crying, and the animal that stood between her and death more times than you can imagine. He turned back toward Sierra. She hadn't spoken since he arrived. She didn't acknowledge his presence. Her entire soul was focused on Onyx. Sierra, he said softly, I've ordered the best healer. He'll save him. She didn't answer. She just whispered, if he dies, I don't know what I'll do. And that was the sound that shattered him. Seong-Min turned to the physician one last time. You have 1 hour, he said. If you fail, you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you hadn't. Then he turned away. Her name was Lady Hua-Yeon, a court favorite, delicate voice, cruel smile. She'd long resented the way Seong-Min's gaze lingered on the foreigner, the outsider who rode without fear, who refused to bow, who stole whispers from every corridor. Now she sat bound to a wooden chair in the shadowed war chamber, her makeup smeared, hair undone, still trying to hold on to dignity as Seong-Min stood over her like a god passing judgment. The room was silent save for the crackle of fire. You poisoned her horse, he said, voice quiet. Lady Hua-Yeon licked her lips. It was just an animal. She trusted it more than any person in this palace. She should have stayed with the beast then, she snapped. That earned her a backhanded blow, not from Seong-Min, but from General Mun, standing beside him, face dark with fury. You disgrace the court, the general hissed. Hua-Yeon's voice shook, but she spat the words anyway. You let her crawl into our walls like rot. Our people fear her. Our nobles laugh at you behind your back. She's not even of this world, and you protect her? Seong-Min stepped forward, eyes burning. No, he said, tone like steel sliding from its sheath. I don't protect her. He leaned in. I fear what I'll become if I don't. She went pale. That night, Lady Hua-Yeon was exiled without trial, her name scratched from the royal scrolls. But the wound she'd left in Sierra still bled. The sun had barely begun to rise, but light filtered through the stable's high windows in golden streaks, catching the floating dust in soft halos. Sierra sat slumped beside Onyx, head resting against his warm flank, her fingers absently tracing the spiral in his mane. She hadn't slept. She hadn't moved much either. Her body ached, but her heart had finally stilled from its screaming. And then he stirred. It was subtle, a twitch beneath her palm, a slow blink from those dark, glassy eyes. Her breath caught. Onyx, she whispered, lifting her head. Hey! His ears flicked slightly. Then came a sound, a low, soft nicker. Tired, but alive. Sierra gasped. Her hands moved frantically, checking his breathing, his eyes, the tension in his muscles. You stayed, she choked out. You really stayed with me. Behind her, she heard movement. Seong-Min stood in the shadows, barely visible, his black robe wrinkled from sleep, or lack of it. He'd been there all night, leaning against the far wall, watching her, watching the horse, saying nothing. Sierra looked up at him. Her eyes, red, rimmed but shining, met his. For the first time since the poisoning, she really looked at him. "How long have you been here?" she asked softly. "I never left." Her mouth trembled. "You meant it, what you said to the healer." He nodded once. If he didn't save him, he wouldn't remain in this kingdom. She stared at him. "You would have exiled your most trusted physician. For me?" A long silence. Then Seong-Min said, voice low, "Not for you. For the part of you that refused to let this creature die alone. For the bond you two share. I couldn't let the world break that." Her lip quivered. "Thank you," she whispered. He stepped closer but stopped just a foot away. The air between them buzzed with things unsaid. "He's strong," Seong-Min added, nodding toward Onyx. "But so are you." Sierra gave a half laugh, half sob. "You sure about that? I've been sobbing in hay for 12 hours. His voice was a near whisper. "Strength isn't silence, Sierra. Strength is staying when it hurts." That silenced her. They stood there, neither touching, neither moving. Just two people in the early morning hush, with a horse who defied death between them. And in that moment, something unspoken passed from her eyes to his. Something that said, "I see what you did, and maybe I'm not so alone here after all." Later that morning, the stables were quiet again. Onyx slept deeply now, his breathing steady. The physician had confirmed it. He would recover. Sierra didn't leave his side, not out of fear anymore, but reverence. When Seong-Min returned, he didn't come with guards. He came with a small ceramic tray, hands steady, bearing a single cup of tea. He knelt beside her, just out of reach, and placed the tray between them. No words, no announcements, just the quiet clink of porcelain against wood. Sierra looked at the cup, then at him. "You brought me tea?" she said softly. "I heard you like jasmine," he replied, eyes on the cup, not her. She almost smiled. "You had someone spy on my preferences?" He finally looked at her. "No, I watched." A beat passed. The tea's steam curled upward into the space between them. She picked it up and took a slow sip. Then, her voice barely above a breath, "Why are you still protecting me?" He didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, like he wasn't sure how to say it without saying too much. "Because I've known many women who wanted to be queens," he said, "but I've never met one who wanted nothing and still made the world turn." She looked away, startled by how deeply that struck her. "You think too highly of me," she murmured. "I think just clearly enough." Silence, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed between them, an almost confession, raw and unfinished. Sierra set the cup down slowly. She didn't look at him when she asked the next question. "What happens when the world remembers I don't belong here?" That stilled him. His voice, when it came, was quiet, taut. "Then I'll remind it that I do." Her eyes finally met his, and for a split second, just one, she almost leaned in. Almost, but she didn't. She stood instead, fast, guarded. "I need air," she said, brushing her hands on her breeches. He stood with her, but didn't follow. And as she walked out, his gaze stayed fixed on the cup she'd left behind, half empty, still warm. The moon was high and full, casting pale silver across the palace gardens. Sierra stood at the edge of the stone path, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her eyes were still red, Not from fresh tears, but from the ones she refused to shed now. Her jaw was clenched, her body still. A statue forged from exhaustion and fury. She didn't turn when she heard his footsteps behind her. "She's been punished," Seong-Min said quietly. Her voice came fast, sharp. "I don't care about punishment." She spun toward him. "I care that someone walked into the stables, your stables, and poisoned him. And why? Because of me. Because I'm here." He took a cautious step closer. "She acted out of jealousy. Of you. Of us." "Exactly," she snapped. "Of me. Because I don't belong here." Her voice cracked, only for a second, but it was enough. "Because I've been walking around this palace pretending I could be part of it, that I could matter, that the way your people looked at me wouldn't matter. But it does, and it always will." Seong-Min's expression tightened, but he kept his voice calm, too calm. "You've saved lives. You've taught my guards more in a month than I have in years." "And it doesn't matter," she shouted. Her voice rang out across the garden. "Because I'll never be one of you. And you?" She stepped forward, jabbing her finger toward his chest. "You're too afraid to admit you want me here." His jaw locked. "What I feel is not your concern." That hit her, but she didn't back down. She stepped even closer. "Then stop showing it." He blinked. Her voice dropped, low and trembling. "Stop looking at me like I'm something you can't name." A long, pregnant silence. Then, his voice, low, dangerous. "And what if I can name it?" She swallowed, then whispered, "Then say it." Her fists were clenched at her sides. "Say it out loud, or let me go." His silence roared louder than any thunder. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't fight. Sierra exhaled like her lungs were giving up. She stepped back. Her eyes were dry now, but emptier. "That's what I thought." She turned, walked away, and for the first time since he wore a crown, Prince Seong-Min stood completely powerless, not against war, not against politics, but against the one woman he couldn't bear to lose, and still didn't know how to keep. The sky was breaking. Heavy clouds churned like beasts above the palace. Thunder cracked in the distance, echoing across the stone walls like warning drums. It was nearly dawn, but the world was dark, too dark. Sierra moved through the rain like a ghost, one hand on Onyx's reins, the other gripping the saddle strap tightly. The stallion was tense beneath her touch, sensing something in the air. The gates loomed ahead, tall, iron, chained in tradition. Strapped to her side was a water skin, dried fruit, a carved dagger wrapped in cloth, a gift from a young maid who'd whispered through tears, "You deserve a world that bows to you." Miss Vaughn, wait." Jun ran toward her, soaked to the skin. She didn't stop walking. "You can't go," he said, panting. He'll come after you." Sierra didn't meet his eyes. He had his chance. "But you..." "Jun," she said softly, "if I don't leave now, I'll lose whatever's left of me." She reached for Onyx's bridle, and then, "Sierra!" His voice ripped through the storm. She froze. The rain fell harder, slicing the air in waves. The wind howled through the courtyard, whipping her curls around her face. The iron gates creaked behind her, as if even they were waiting. She didn't turn. Seong-Min's footsteps pounded across the stone. No guards, no robe, no royal mask, just a man, soaked, breathless, sword belt hanging from a half-fastened robe, hair clinging to his face like ink in the rain. "Don't go," he said, his voice shaking. Still, she didn't face him. You let fear speak louder than anything else, she said. You let me believe I didn't matter. I was wrong, he said, almost stumbling forward. Now she turned. His face was bare, not fierce, not commanding, just wrecked. Every part of me was raised to hide, he said, lightning flashing behind him, to command, to control, to silence anything that made me feel. And then you, he breathed. You appeared, and I couldn't unfeel it. Sierra's throat closed. You confuse me. You break every rule I've ever lived by. But when you're near, his eyes locked on hers. I remember what it feels like to breathe. The gate creaked behind her. She looked at it, then back at him. Rain fell harder, a long pause, a breath. Then, I want you to stay. Not because of prophecy, not because of honor, not even because I'm a coward when you walk away. His voice cracked. But because the moment you leave, this place turns cold again. Her eyes shined with something soft, something breaking open, and for the first time, she believed him. For a moment, nothing moved. Not Onyx, not the wind, not the world. Just her, just him, staring across the space where everything had once shattered. And then, she dropped the reins. She didn't run, didn't charge. She walked, one step, then another, until her soaked gloves were pressed flat against his chest. Her eyes locked on his, trembling with everything she still hadn't said. He swallowed hard, jaw tense. Tell me to go, she whispered. You have to let me go. He didn't. Then, tell me to stay, she breathed again, softer. Not as a soldier, not as a rider, not as some piece of prophecy, but as me. His hand rose slowly, fingers brushing the side of her face, pushing back rain-slick curls with a reverence that felt like worship. Stay, he said, as you are, as you've always been. Mine. And then, she surged forward. Their mouths collided, not gently, not carefully, unfiltered, real. The storm exploded around them, thunder splitting the sky. Rain poured down in silver sheets. But he kissed her like a man who had forgotten his own name and only remembered hers. She fisted her hands in his robe. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her in, anchoring her against the storm, as if he was afraid she might vanish. The world blurred, time shattered, and in that kiss, they chose each other. Not fate, not fear, each other. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads pressed together in the cold mist. Sierra whispered, You broke every wall I had. Seong-Min closed his eyes. You're the only thing I couldn't command. Smoke curled in the sky like ink across parchment. The enemy had fallen. The rebellion was crushed. Victory belonged to Seong-Min's army, but not without blood. Sierra stood at the edge of the ruined field, her hands smeared with dirt and ash, Onyx pawing the ground beside her. She had ridden harder than anyone, fought alongside generals, and pulled a wounded boy from the fire with her bare hands. When Seong-Min found her, she was alone, looking out across the valley where the final strike had landed. You stayed, he said. She didn't turn. I had reason to. He stepped closer. I could command thousands, he said quietly, but I couldn't command my heart to stop thinking of you. That made her look at him. His armor was dented, hair unbound, blood staining his sleeve, but his eyes were burning, alive, open. You've made me see the world in color again, he said. Sierra's throat tightened. Seong-Min? She reached out, then hesitated. I wasn't meant to stay here, she whispered. This isn't my world, but I can't imagine leaving now. Their eyes locked. Then, thunder, and the skies broke open. The rain came fast and fierce, but neither of them moved. Seong-Min stepped forward and cupped her face in his calloused hands. His eyes searched hers once more, as if asking permission. She leaned in first, and their lips met under a storm born for them. Raw, trembling, desperate. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. It was earned. And when he pulled her into his chest and she buried her face in his shoulder, it wasn't just love. It was surrender. Baek Do-yoon stood before the prince's table, scroll unrolled, the ink faded and trembling in the torchlight. "I was wrong," the advisor said, voice like rusted silk. Seong-Min sat with Sierra beside him, still damp from the storm. She listened with clenched fists. The prophecy did not warn of a destroyer, but of a rewriter, Baek continued. A rider of midnight skin and fireborn beast who could bend time's blade. He looked at Sierra. But such power has a price. The scroll speaks of balance. That which rewrites must pay a toll. To remain in this world, she must become a fixed thread. "And if I'm not?" Sierra asked. "You remain too strong too, foreign to time's pattern. Your presence could warp what was meant to be. Wars, alliances, births." He hesitated. "Or fate may take you by force." The silence was shattering. Sierra stood slowly, her pulse roaring in her ears. And in that moment, the weight of love felt like a curse. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched Seong-Min from the shadows of his chamber, the curve of his shoulder as he rested for the first time in days. His breathing was steady, trusting. She touched the edges of his robe, brushed a kiss over his brow, and whispered, "I love you enough to not destroy your world." By the time the moon crossed the courtyard sky, Sierra was gone. No one saw her saddle Onyx. No one heard the gates creak open. Only the wind knew she had ridden into the storm. When Seong-Min awoke to an empty bed and no guards at her door, something inside him fractured. He ran, barefoot, robe trailing, shouting her name. But she was gone. Only the stable boy stood trembling beside an empty stall, holding a note folded in twine. It read, "I was never meant to touch the thread of history, but you made me believe I could. If this is the end, I want you to know, you are the only reason I stayed as long as I did. Don't come after me. Please, let me be your memory, not your ruin. Sierra." The sound of engines and human voices came before the pain. Sierra gasped awake, lungs aching, body soaked, hair clinging to her face like ivy. She was sprawled in a bed of damp pine needles, the sky above a cold gray, rain still misting the trees. Onyx stood a few feet away, calm, watching her with those wise eyes that had seen two worlds. "Sierra Vaughn," someone called through the woods. "We found her." Bright lights, rescue vests, radio crackles. Hands reached for her, voices overlapped, and still, she clutched something in her right fist. Not a phone, not her reins, but something small, metal, and ancient. When she opened her hand, her breath caught. It was Seong-Min's royal insignia, the one he wore at his waist, a dragon forged in silver, wrapped around a flame. It should have burned in the fire, should have vanished with him. But it was here, in her palm. "Sierra," a medic said, kneeling beside her, "can you tell us what happened?" She looked around slowly, back at the rock where lightning had struck. But now, the rock was different, worn, cracked with age. "No," she said quietly, "you wouldn't believe me." 3 weeks later, Sierra sat on her grandfather's porch in Georgia, sipping mint tea with a blanket around her shoulders. Onyx grazed in the field nearby, restless but healing. She still woke up with dreams of fire and silk, of him. Her grandfather, old and sharp as ever, brought out a dusty wooden box and laid it on the table. "You might want to see this," he said, flipping through parchment. "Came from a university dig I was funding in the Sobek Mountains, ancient kingdom ruins." Sierra blinked. "That's near the rock." He nodded. Inside were photos, grainy but clear enough. One showed a carved wall of stone, a mounted figure, a woman with long curls, riding a massive black horse. Behind her stood a tall man in royal robes, hand outstretched toward her. Sierra's throat tightened. "No way," she whispered. "It gets better," her grandfather said, handing her the next image. A closer shot. Inscribed in faded characters, "She who came from thunder and loved the prince with no fate." Her name, written phonetically in ancient Korean script, Shira. She couldn't breathe. This wasn't a hallucination, wasn't some time travel dream. She had been real to them. A legend. A prophecy. A woman who rewrote history. Sometimes, in the quietest hours, when the world outside her window went still and even the stars held their breath, Sierra dreamed of the life that never was. A small boy with her eyes and Seong-Min's seriousness, standing in a courtyard of golden leaves, bowing clumsily to the elders before running to her arms. A little girl with a braid down her back and Onyx's wild spirit in her laugh, learning to ride in circles while palace guards snuck smiles behind their stoic masks. She dreamed of silk robes laid beside her equestrian boots, of foreign lullabies sung under stone lanterns, of Seong-Min kneeling beside her in the early hours, brushing hair from her face, whispering, even in another life, "I'd find you." And then she'd wake, alone, warm but not whole, successful but unmoored. Because while the world called her a legend, she had once been a woman in love, in time, in place, and every year, the ache returned like clockwork. Not just for him, but for the version of herself that only that world had ever seen. 5 years later, she traveled the world, spoken at conferences, built something lasting. Her name echoed in rooms that once never would have welcomed her. But no accolade ever filled the space he left behind. No lecture stage replaced the moonlit cliffs, or the quiet hush of training fields, or the brush of royal silk when he passed too close. Nothing can replace the moonlit cliffs or the hush of palace mornings. No voice replaced his. She missed the weight of that world, the one where she was more than just brilliant. She was believed in. She missed the mornings when the mist curled around Onyx's hooves like offerings, the quiet nods from stoic guards who once called her an outsider, the stolen smiles, the shared tea, the woman she became there. And every year, on the same storm-kissed day, she returned to this place, the place where time broke, where love rewrote the sky, and every year it remained silent until now. The forest hadn't changed. Not really. The trees still reached for the heavens like they were begging to be remembered. The rock still leaned, cracked and broken, moss curling around its edges like time trying to heal its own wounds. But Sierra Vaughn had changed. Her curls were longer now. Her face held the softness of joy and the sharpness of loss. There was a peace in her silence, a weight in her walk, the kind of strength not born of riding, but of surviving two worlds and belonging fully to neither. In her gloved hand she held it, the insignia, worn, cold, etched with memory. She hadn't let it go, not once in all these years. Somewhere in a time not far from memory, he had done the unthinkable. After Sierra disappeared, Prince Seong-Min did not weep. He hunted time itself. He searched for her, relentlessly. He didn't sleep for many nights. He rode across provinces, questioned ancient monks, consulted forbidden scrolls. When the storm cleared and she didn't return, he sent emissaries into the mountains with her name on their tongues, like a sacred word. He walked barefoot to the stone in the dead of night, armor abandoned, crown forgotten. He knelt in the mud and whispered her name until the cold numbed his mouth. If I must become myth to follow her, then let history forget my name. I give you everything I am, just let her come back. But nothing came. So he became something else and vanished from the throne. The court called it madness. The priests called it mourning. But they didn't know he had found an ancient order of scholars hidden beyond the rivers of the east. Keepers of time, watchers of storms. He studied, waited, marked the sky. Years passed. The world aged, but he didn't stop. The thread she unraveled, he once wrote in a scroll buried beneath stone, is the one I now follow. And when the storm returned, the same storm, he stepped through it with nothing but her name. The wind shifted. The trees stopped moving. And then, Sierra, a whisper, a breath, a memory pulled forward by love too stubborn to fade. Her heart stumbled. She turned slowly, slow enough to protect herself if it wasn't real. And there he stood, Seong-Min. Not a vision, not a dream. Him. Older, yes. Weathered by time and wisdom. But his presence, unchanged. The same fire in his eyes. The same grace in his stillness. She didn't speak. She couldn't. So he did. You kept your promise. Her throat trembled. Which one? He stepped closer, slow and certain, gaze never breaking from hers. You remembered me. Tears slid down her cheeks. How are you here? I saw you fade. I left you. You left to protect me, he said gently. But love doesn't fade with time. I tried to forget, she whispered. I never did, he replied. I spent years chasing the thread you left behind. She barely breathed. And? He smiled, worn, patient, eternal. It led me back to you. The insignia slipped from her hand into the moss. She ran toward him. He caught her mid-step, arms wrapping her with the force of never again. There were no thrones, no guards, no scrolls. Only two hearts, stitched across time, reunited beneath a storm that finally stopped screaming. She pressed her forehead to his, voice shaking. I waited for you. And I loved you, he said, through every lifetime we missed. Their kiss wasn't desperate. It was deliberate, solid, like something forged, shattered, and remade by the fire of destiny itself. Above them, thunder rolled, soft now, not angry, just remembering, and then, finally, exhaling. The end.